we know that Rome celebrated this victory, and I think we could talk about it in detail. How do they celebrate the victory? And if I remember correctly, the claim in the book is that this revolt changed not only Jewish history, but changed Roman history. So if we can focus first from the Roman perspective, how do they celebrate it? And why do you claim that it changed Roman history?
Right. So actually, in the immediate aftermath of the siege and conquest of Jerusalem in 70, a year later, Vespasian and Titus were granted a triumph in Rome by the Senate and the people. So what that involved was a kind of procession going around the streets of Rome, and there were precedents for these triumphal processions going back into the Roman Republican period. So that involved, bringing captives from Jerusalem and marching them through the streets, and also having sort of wagons with like big placards on them and showing scenes from the revolt, and then also carrying booty from the war, including one of the menorahs from the temple, and sort of other things, a copy of the law, and going along a route through the city with a large crowd there. And at the end of it, in a sort of ghastly scene in Roman practice, executing one of the leaders of the revolt, a guy named Simon, in a prison at the foot of the Capitoline Hill in Rome. So actually, I'm not sure whether a lot of your listeners know this or not, but in fact, Rome had during this period a large population of Jews. And one of the ways in which my book differs strongly from other relatively recent books about the revolt is I'm pretty sure that there would have been a lot of Jews in that crowd who saw this triumphal procession. And to me, that was a very significant event in Jewish history, and not a happy one. Afterward, the Romans, specifically Vespasian and his sons, used the revolt to propagandize the legitimation of their dynasty. And so they embarked upon a building program in Rome. The first thing that they completed was a so-called Temple of Peace, in which some of the temple treasures were brought and then displayed, along with other artworks from around the Roman Empire. And then two other monuments which don't really come across the radar of people very often as being related to the revolt, but are incredibly significant. Of course, the Colosseum in Rome, or what's called the Colosseum, originally was called the Flavian Amphitheater. And we happen to know from an inscription which was restored by a classical scholar, which shows that the Colosseum was built, at least in part, supposedly from spoils of the war itself. So, I mean, it's almost impossible, I think, to overestimate the significance of that for Jews, for Romans, for visitors to Rome for literally the last 2,000 years. I mean, Rome is the Colosseum is the symbol of Rome, and almost none of I go to Rome all the time. I've been there probably 50 times. Very few of the millions of people who go to the Colosseum understand that that is a victory monument over the Jews. That was its original purpose, is to celebrate the victory of the Flavian dynasty over the Jews in this war. It was built, as I say, at least in part, using the treasures from Judea. And then in the Circus Maximus, another very famous monument, a few years later, a few years after the dedication of the Flavian Amphitheater, there was a triumphal arch put up, not the Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum, but a much bigger arch at the Circus Maximus. And there was an inscription there which was lost, but it was copied, and so we know what it said, which claimed that that Titus had been the first ever to conquer Jerusalem, which was a lie. Jerusalem had been conquered several times before, but obviously the Circus Maximus was a monument that was visited by millions of people in the ancient world who saw that inscription. So, this war and its outcome was used to remind the Roman population and to visitors for centuries, really, of this great triumph over the rebellious Jews, and with all of the consequences. So I think that this really changed relations between Romans and Jews, if not permanently, then definitely for hundreds of years, especially for the worse. So it's an unfortunate chapter, and kind of one of those turning point chapters in history.